My name is Emily Carter. I'm 28 years old, living in Dallas, Texas, and I work as an accountant. On paper, people call me dependable, responsible, and practical. The truth? I'm resilient. I bend, but I don't break. For most of my life, I stayed in the background, overlooked, underestimated. But I've learned, shadows can burn just as brightly as light. My brother mocked me for riding the bus, laughing in front of his friends like I was beneath him. But he froze, completely speechless, when I pulled up in a Lamborghini and stepped out as someone he'd never imagined I could be. Before I tell you how it happened, let me ask you, have you ever been underestimated? If you're watching, please like and subscribe. It helps me more than you know. And tell me in the comments, who underestimated you and how did you prove them wrong? Also, I'd love to know where you're watching from. It was just a Monday. Nothing special. Soft sunlight, hot Texas air, 3 people sitting at the bus stop with me. I clutched a coffee in one hand, a lunchbox in my bag, and the usual thought running through my head. Make it through the day. Keep your expenses down. Dallas mornings had taught me patience. Every morning at 6:45, the bus would come. Like clockwork. I glanced at the building's glass windows and caught my reflection. Plain shirt, simple glasses, ID badge clipped at my side. Anyone else might have said I looked neat, quiet, maybe boring. But I knew beneath the surface there was something sharper, something waiting. Then came the sound, the low growl of an engine. A black Mustang turned the corner and roared up to the curb. Behind the wheel? My brother Ryan, our family's golden boy. He parked, hopped out, and strutted with 3 of his friends in tow, sunglasses gleaming, arrogance dripping off him like sweat. "Hey," he called out, grinning widely. His voice carried across the stop. "Bus girl." The words cut hotter than the Texas sun. His friends erupted in laughter. One shouted, "Don't worry, Emily. One day you'll graduate to a bicycle." Another chimed in, "All hail the queen of the blue line." I tightened my grip on my coffee cup. My face burned, but I forced myself to stand tall. "Ryan, stop it," I muttered. He smirked, ignoring me. "Look at her, guys. Off to work again, counting pennies, but still no car. Maybe buses are part of her brand." He chuckled, shaking his head. "I'd offer you a ride, Em, but today this Mustang only seats premium passengers. Premium laughter only." The elderly woman beside me shot me a sympathetic look. My stomach knotted. My chest felt like it was caving in, but I didn't give him the satisfaction. Resilience doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just stands still. The bus arrived with a hiss of brakes. I stood, lifted my chin, and stepped on board. Ryan's grin widened as our eyes locked for one brief moment, and then the doors closed. The Mustang faded behind us, and I disappeared into the city. To them, it was a simple scene: bus, laughter, humiliation. But they didn't see what I went home to: my dining table covered in notebooks, my bedroom walls plastered with sticky notes, the glow of my laptop at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., as I built workflows and balanced side projects no one knew about. They didn't see how every insult became fuel. Dad always told Ryan, "You're destined for greatness." Dad told me, "Emily, be realistic. Stay safe." Mom smiled at Ryan like he was her son. She smiled at me and said, "You're fine. Just marry right and you'll be secure." The only one who saw me was Grandma. She used to squeeze my hand during Sunday dinners and whisper, "Quiet rivers run deep." But when she passed away, no one was left to remind me. In high school, Ryan drove Dad's old pickup. I caught the 6:45 bus. He was king. I was invisible. In college, Ryan joined a frat, partied in his car, and lived loudly. I worked double shifts, studied by bus light, and lived quietly. By the time I started at the accounting firm, the bus jokes were practically his hobby. One March afternoon, Ryan showed up at my office. He leaned on my desk, smirked at my coworkers, and said loudly, "Do they offer bus stipends here?" "My sister's their platinum commuter." Awkward laughter filled the room. My stomach dropped. I yanked him aside, whispering furiously, "Stop doing this in front of people." He shrugged. Lighten up? It's just fun. No, it wasn't fun. It was a habit, a drug. Attention was his addiction, and my humiliation was his cheap high. Dad's birthday came around, and we celebrated at a fancy steakhouse. The whole family was there. I had saved for weeks to buy Dad a beautiful leather wallet he'd been eyeing. When I gave it to him, he smiled politely. Thanks, Em. But then Ryan slid car keys across the table with a flourish. Lease is in your name, Dad. No more old clunker for you. The table roared with applause. My wallet looked like nothing more than a paperweight, and then Ryan pulled a crisp $20 bill from his pocket, slid it toward me, and said loudly, Here you go, Em, for your next bus pass. My treat. The laughter was deafening. I sat frozen, napkin tearing in my hand as my fingers clenched. My eyes burned, but I refused to let a tear fall. That night, lying awake, staring at the ceiling, I realized this wasn't just casual teasing. It was a pattern. A story is being written about me over and over again in front of everyone, and if I didn't stop it, that story would become the only one anyone ever believed. The next morning, I looked at myself in the mirror. My eyes were swollen, my face pale. But behind me, on the wall, were those sticky notes. Notes about business ideas, revenue models, and operations flow. For the first time, I whispered to my reflection, I don't need his language to fight back. I'll use mine, because while Ryan mocked, I had been building. While he was loud, I was steady. While he played the star, I was building systems that would outlast him. And one day, I wouldn't just ride the bus anymore. One day, the street corner would fill with the sound of an engine unlike anything he'd ever driven. A sleek black Lamborghini would purr to a stop. Its doors would rise, and I'd step out, and the brother who called me bus girl would finally choke on silence. If you've ever grown up in a house where one child was the favorite and the other was the reliable one, then you already know how my story began. My brother Ryan was the sun, and me? I was expected to orbit quietly, giving light back to him whenever he needed it. On the surface, we looked like a perfectly normal middle-class family in Dallas. Dad worked in construction management. Mom was a part-time real estate agent. Sunday dinners, birthday cakes, Christmas stockings. We had all the appearances of a family glued together by tradition. But glue can hide cracks. Ryan was born 2 years before me, and it seemed like from the moment he could walk, people were cheering for him. Dad took him to baseball games, bragging to his buddies about Ryan's swing. Mom boasted about his charm to her friends at church. He was the boy who could do no wrong, even when he did plenty wrong. When Ryan crashed his first car at 17, Dad said, "Boys will be boys." When I scraped my knee biking to school, Mom shook her head. "Emily, you need to be more careful." Ryan's mistakes were brushed off as adventures. My mistakes were written down as warnings. I wasn't unloved. But I was useful. I set the table, washed dishes, tutored Ryan when he couldn't pass math. On Sundays, when Grandma still lived with us, she'd whisper, "Emily, you're the glue. Don't forget, glue holds the house together even if nobody praises it." I'd smile, but deep down, I wanted more than to be invisible glue. I wanted to be seen. Our family dinners were a stage. Dad would lean back with a glass of wine, Mom would beam at Ryan's latest story, and I'd quietly pass the potatoes. Ryan would brag about his Mustang, his friends, and his future. "Emily, how's work?" Dad would sometimes ask. I'd open my mouth to answer, but before I could, Ryan would cut in. "She's doing fine, except she still takes the bus." Laughter, always laughter. Even Mom laughed, covering her mouth as if that made it gentler. I learned to chew quickly, smile thinly, and let the moment pass. My days were ordinary. Wake up at 6, make coffee, walk to the bus stop, spend 45 minutes traveling across the city, crunch numbers at the office until evening. Come home, heat leftovers, work on side projects until midnight. Ryan's days were loud. Roaring engines, crowded parties, flashing photos on social media. He lived publicly. I lived privately. He had an audience. I had notebooks. And in those notebooks, dreams that no one ever asked about. I wrote down ideas about building systems for small businesses, consulting services, and process designs. Things most people found boring, but I found thrilling. While Ryan slept off hangovers, I was mapping out ways to streamline workflows and save companies thousands. But to my parents, that wasn't a story worth telling. Christmas should have been warm, but that year it left frostbite. We were at Grandma's old house, now Mom's pride after renovating it for the holidays. Family and relatives filled the living room. Ryan handed Dad a watch, sleek, silver, expensive looking. The oohs and ahs filled the air. Then came my turn. I had spent weeks knitting Mom a shawl, a soft lavender piece I worked on every night after long shifts. I handed it to her shyly. She unwrapped it, forced a smile, and said, "Oh, thanks, Emily," then turned to admire her son's gift again. Ryan smirked at me across the room. Not cruel, just knowing. He knew the hierarchy. He knew the game, and the worst part? So did I. Later that night, when the relatives left, Grandma pulled me aside into the kitchen. Her hands, wrinkled and warm, cupped my cheeks. "Emily," she whispered, "don't measure your worth by how loud the applause is. The quiet ones, the steady ones, they're the ones who build the foundations." I nodded, swallowing tears. "But what if no one ever notices, Grandma?" Her eyes twinkled. "Oh, they'll notice. One day they'll have no choice." That was the last Christmas I had with her. She passed away the following spring. After that, the balance tipped further. Ryan's star grew brighter, mine faded into the shadows. After Grandma was gone, there was no buffer. No one to redirect Mom's praise or Dad's pride. It was just Ryan, louder than ever, and me, trying not to disappear completely. Still, I kept working. I saved. I studied. I stayed up nights mapping out systems, telling myself that one day there'd be a moment where things would shift. But the shift didn't come gently. It came with Ryan leaning into his role as the entertainer and me being shoved into the servant. It was during a casual Sunday dinner just months after Grandma's passing. Mom had asked me to help in the kitchen. I served food, poured drinks, and cleared plates. Ryan lounged back, cracking jokes, while Dad laughed. At one point, Ryan leaned over with a grin and said, "Em, you'd make a great maid. Always running around, never sitting. Maybe you should stick to serving people instead of numbers." The table burst out laughing. I froze, my hand gripping the serving spoon. My cheeks burned, but I smiled faintly and said nothing. But inside, something snapped. That night, lying in bed, I replayed Ryan's words over and over. A maid? A servant? That's what they thought of me? That's the story they wanted to keep telling? I stared at my ceiling in the dark, the sticky notes still glowing faintly in the corner from the streetlight outside. And for the first time, I whispered to myself, I won't play servant forever. They'll see. What I didn't know was just how soon I'd get my chance, and how spectacularly the tables would turn. The night Ryan joked about me being a maid stayed lodged in my chest like a shard of glass. I told myself it was just one comment, that maybe I was overreacting. But deep down I knew it wasn't just a joke. It was a glimpse of what my family really thought of me. And once I started paying attention, the signs were everywhere. It started with the little things. Whenever we went out as a family, I was always the one carrying extra bags, fetching napkins, and settling bills with tip calculations. Ryan would pat my shoulder and smirk. Good job. Em, you'd make a great personal assistant. If I spoke about my work, Dad would nod politely, then turn back to Ryan to ask about his next car upgrade or business plan. At first, I tried to laugh it off. I'd tell myself they don't mean it. They don't realize how it feels. But the truth, they meant it enough to repeat it. Again and again. One Saturday morning, I went to a cafe near our neighborhood. I had my laptop open, crunching through a side project for a small startup, Maya's company. I was lost in formulas when I heard a familiar laugh. Ryan. He walked in with two of his buddies, loud and confident. He spotted me immediately. Well, if it isn't Bus Girl herself, he announced, loud enough for the barista to glance over. I shut my laptop. Can you not, Ryan? I whispered, trying to keep my voice steady. He grinned. Relax. What are you working on? Calculating bus schedules? His friends laughed. One of them added, Does she even own a car? My jaw tightened. I'm working, I said firmly. Ryan leaned down, lowering his voice just enough that only I heard. Working on staying invisible? Don't worry, Em. You're doing great. Then he straightened up, flashed a smile to the cafe, and sauntered off with his entourage. I sat there frozen, fingers trembling on the keyboard. Part of me wanted to chase him, scream, tell him I wasn't invisible. But another part of me knew anger wouldn't fix it. Proof would. A week later, my parents invited both of us to dinner at their house. They had big news. We gathered at the table, Mom glowing, Dad serious, Ryan practically buzzing with excitement. Dad cleared his throat. Your brother's been offered a partnership at the dealership he's been working with. They see potential in him. Mom clapped her hands. Isn't that wonderful? Ryan, our businessman. Everyone turned to Ryan. He shrugged modestly, but the pride on his face was obvious. Then Mom looked at me. And you, Emily? How's the office? Still the same? I smiled thinly. Still the same, steady, Ryan chuckled. Translation, boring. My fork froze midair. It's not boring, I said quietly. He leaned back, smirking. Come on, Em. You sit in a cubicle, crunch numbers, then wait for the bus. Meanwhile, I'm out there making moves, Dad chuckled. He's not wrong, sweetheart. Stability is good, but Ryan's chasing an opportunity. That's something. My stomach twisted. It wasn't just Ryan. My parents were buying into his narrative. Hook, line and sinker. I forced myself to finish dinner. My appetite gone. The breaking point of these small humiliations came at my cousin's birthday. A backyard barbecue, neighbors, relatives, and kids running around. Ryan and his friends held court near the grill. I walked over with a tray of drinks. Mom had asked me to help. As I handed them out, Ryan smirked. Careful, everyone, he said loudly. Don't spill. Emily's working part-time as a waitress now. Laughter erupted. Someone added, Well, she's got the skills for it. I froze, tray in hand, cheeks blazing. That's not funny, I said quietly. Ryan leaned closer. Then don't make it so easy. The laughter kept ringing, even as I slipped away to the kitchen. I leaned against the counter, hands trembling, and then, like an answer to my rage, my phone buzzed. A message from Maya. Board meeting set. Need you to present the operations model. Could lead to contract. You in? I stared at the words, heart pounding. For the first time that night, I felt the smallest flicker of hope. That week, I started noticing the way Ryan fed off my silence. Every time I didn't fight back, it permitted him to go further. He'd joke louder, make bolder comments, pull more people into the humiliation. It wasn't just sibling rivalry anymore. It was a performance. And I was the punchline. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that I was done playing that role. One Friday evening, Mom called us both over. She said there'd be a family discussion at dinner on Sunday. Her tone was sharp, serious. I didn't know it yet, but that dinner was going to be the moment the cracks in our family split wide open. And Ryan? He was about to make the cruelest comment yet, the one that would push me past silence into something far more dangerous. Sunday dinners at my parents' house were always elaborate, almost ceremonial. Mom insisted on cloth napkins, Dad always opened a bottle of wine, and Ryan strutted in like he was the guest of honor instead of just their son. This Sunday, though, the air felt heavier. Mom's voice on the phone had been sharp. We need to talk. When I walked into the dining room, Ryan was already there, leaning back with his arms stretched across two chairs, his Mustang keys glittering on the table like trophies. We sat. Mom served roast chicken, Dad poured wine, Ryan grinned. Halfway through the meal, Mom cleared her throat. Your father and I have been thinking about the future of this family. My stomach tightened. Nothing good ever came from that phrase. Ryan's eyes sparkled. He already knew, Mom continued. We want to make sure everyone is set up for success. Ryan's been offered a chance to buy into the dealership, but to make that work, he'll need help. Support. Dad nodded. Which is where you come in, Emily. I set my fork down slowly. Me? Dad leaned forward. We think it's time you considered selling your townhouse. The words hit me like ice water. That's my home, I said, voice trembling. Mom smiled tightly. Sweetheart, it's just property. Family comes first. Ryan needs this investment. Ryan smirked. Come on, Em, you don't even drive. What do you need a house near downtown for? You could rent a little apartment closer to the bus line. Laughter. Light, casual, but it sliced through me. Dad's voice hardened. It's not a request. It's what's best for the family. You'll get money out of it, of course. And Ryan will finally be established. I stared at them, stunned. So you want me to sell my home for him? To give up what I worked for? Ryan leaned in, eyes gleaming. Don't make it so dramatic, Em. You're good at numbers, right? Crunch them. The math is simple. I win, you stay, stable. Like always. I could barely breathe. My parents, my own parents, were siding with him, plotting against me. Then Ryan pushed it further. He pulled a folded $20 bill from his pocket, just like at Dad's birthday dinner. With a smirk, he slid it across the table toward me. Here, he said loudly so everyone could hear, for your next bus pass. Consider it a down payment on the house. The room roared with laughter. Dad chuckling, Mom smiling, Ryan's smug face shining in the glow of his own cruelty. I froze. My cheeks burned. My throat closed up. The humiliation was suffocating. I waited for Mom to tell him to stop, for Dad to say he'd gone too far. But no one did. The silence from them was worse than the joke. Because it told me one thing. This wasn't just Ryan. This was all of them. They didn't see me as an equal. They saw me as a servant, a support, a resource to be used up for Ryan's shine. I picked up the $20 bill with shaking hands. My lips trembled, but I forced a smile. Thanks, I whispered. Ryan leaned back, triumphant. He thought he'd won. That night, back at my townhouse, I sat on the floor with the lights off. The $20 bill lay crumpled beside me. Tears blurred my vision, hot and endless. I whispered into the darkness, I'm not their servant. I'm not his joke. But even as I cried, a small, fierce spark lit in my chest. The betrayal was complete. My parents had chosen Ryan. They'd humiliated me, dismissed me, demanded I sacrifice my home, and that meant I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, my phone buzzed. A text from Maya. Board approved your proposal. They want you to come in as operations director. The offer letter's ready. My heart pounded. For the first time, I realized I was standing at the edge of something bigger. Something that could not only save me, but make every laugh, every insult, every cruel $20 bill worthless. I wiped my tears, stared at the glowing screen, and whispered to myself, they think I'll stay broken. They're wrong. What they didn't know was that their betrayal had just lit the fuse of my revenge. I used to think betrayal would come like a thunderclap, loud, sudden, unmistakable. But the truth? It came like a quiet dinner. A $20 bill slid across the table, and the silence of parents who chose a son over their daughter. When I got home that night, I didn't even turn on the lights. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and sank onto the floor. My townhouse, usually my sanctuary, suddenly felt like a cage. The silence pressed down on me. I replayed their words over and over. Sell your townhouse. Family comes first. You could rent closer to the bus line, and Ryan's voice, smug, sharp. You're good at numbers, right? Crunch them. The math is simple. I win, you stay stable. Tears came hot and fast. I buried my face in my hands. Why am I never enough? My chest heaved. My throat ached. I hadn't cried like that in years. Not since Grandma died. I didn't call anyone. I didn't text Maya back. I couldn't bear to. Because how do you explain to someone that your family, the people meant to protect you, had just handed you over like spare change? Hours passed, At some point, I ended up curled on the couch, staring at the sticky notes still clinging to the wall. My plans, my dreams, they looked pathetic, childish, like scraps of paper pretending to be worth something. I whispered bitterly, maybe Ryan's right. Maybe I am just background. A servant. The word stung like poison. Monday morning, I dragged myself out of bed, pulled on the same plain shirt, and went to work. I moved through the motions like a ghost, typing numbers, balancing ledgers, answering emails. Colleagues laughed in the break room, talked about vacations, new cars, promotions. I smiled faintly, poured coffee, and slipped out before anyone noticed how dead my eyes felt. At lunch, I sat alone. Ryan's words echoed like a chant. Maid, servant, bus girl. I chewed my sandwich mechanically, tasting nothing. That evening, my phone buzzed again. Maya's name. Board wants to meet you this week. They're serious, Em. Don't disappear. I stared at the screen. My thumb hovered over the reply button, but the weight of my family's betrayal was still crushing me. My parents wanted me stripped of my home. My brother wanted me humiliated, and a dark thought whispered, what if they're right? What if I'm not capable of more? I locked my phone, shoved it in a drawer, and curled up in bed. 2 days passed like fog. I went to work, came home, went through motions, but inside I felt hollow. On Wednesday night, I broke completely. I walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer, and pulled out the $20 bill Ryan had shoved at me. Crumpled, ugly, a symbol of everything I wasn't to them. I held it up, staring. My hands trembled. This is all they think I'm worth, I whispered. I almost tore it to pieces. Almost. But then my eyes drifted to the sticky notes again. Those stubborn little squares of hope. They hadn't fallen. They hadn't given up, and something inside me shifted. I sat down at the table, wiped my eyes, opened my laptop. Slowly, I typed out a message to Maya. I'm in. Tell me when. My fingers hovered before hitting send. My heart pounded, then I pressed the button. A rush of adrenaline surged through me. For the first time in days, I felt alive. I realized then, Ryan wasn't wrong about one thing. Numbers don't lie. And the numbers said I had value, real value, that he couldn't touch. They thought I'd give up my house. They thought I'd fold into their plan. But no, I wasn't going to stay broken. I whispered it into the quiet room, voice steady this time. I'll make them regret every laugh, every insult, every dollar they threw in my face. I'll show them what happens when the servant refuses to serve. That night, I fell asleep with tear-streaked cheeks and clenched fists. But for the first time, I dreamed not of humiliation, but of power. I didn't know yet how. I didn't know when, but I knew this. The next time my family tried to humiliate me, I wouldn't be the one sitting silently at the table. I would be the one pulling the strings. The morning after I sent that message to Maya, the air felt different. The betrayal still burned, but underneath the ash, a new fire had begun. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about Ryan's laughter. I was thinking about the future. My future. Maya called me that afternoon. Emily, she said, her voice brisk but warm. The board loved your proposal. They want you as operations director. Salary, benefits, stock options, the works. My breath caught. Are you serious? Dead serious. You've got a talent for systems. We need you. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The tears stung again, but these weren't the same tears I'd cried on the floor a few nights ago. These were different. Okay, I whispered. I'm in. I didn't tell my family. Not a word. At home, I went about my routine as if nothing had changed, catching the bus, crunching numbers at my day job, sitting through family dinners where Ryan's voice dominated. But behind closed doors, I was laying bricks for something bigger. Maya looped me into meetings. I started designing scalable systems for her startup, vendor contracts, payroll structures, efficiency models. Slowly, my fingerprints spread across the company's foundation. Each night, I pinned more notes to my wall, timelines, projections, milestones. My townhouse, once a cage, became a war room. But revenge required more than just my rise. It required his fall. So I started watching Ryan. He bragged endlessly about the dealership, about deals he was making, partners he was charming, risks he was taking. At first, it sounded impressive, but then I listened closer. Inventory's a mess. But that's someone else's problem, he told Dad one night. Numbers don't matter if you can talk smooth, he told his friends at a barbecue. I took mental notes. Ryan's strength was image. His weakness? He didn't respect details. He never had. And in business, details are the difference between empire and ruin. I couldn't do it alone. So I reached out to people Ryan underestimated. People like me. There was Sarah, a mutual acquaintance who'd worked under Ryan briefly. She told me about his sloppy paperwork, his late payments, his careless signatures. There was Marcus, an old classmate now in finance, who warned me the dealership was bleeding cash behind the scenes. Piece by piece, I built a picture. Not of the golden boy my family idolized, but of a reckless man teetering on the edge of collapse. The more I uncovered, the more dangerous my thoughts became. What if? When the collapse came, I wasn't just a bystander. What if I made sure he fell, hard, publicly, undeniably? The idea both terrified and thrilled me. One evening, Ryan texted me, "Dinner Sunday. Don't be late. Family only." I stared at the message. A chill ran down my spine. Another dinner. Another stage. Another humiliation waiting to happen. But this time I wouldn't go as the servant. I'd go as the spy, the strategist, the sister they didn't know existed. All week I worked like a machine. Days at my accounting job, evenings at the startup, nights compiling evidence on Ryan's recklessness. I printed documents, copied emails, highlighted inconsistencies. My binder grew thick with proof. And in the back of my mind, a single image played on repeat. Ryan's face when his empire crumbled, when his smirk finally broke. Before Sunday's dinner, I decided to test my growing confidence. On Friday, a coworker joked, "Still riding the bus, Em?" Normally, I would have flushed, laughed nervously, let it slide. This time, I looked him in the eye and said calmly, "Yeah, it saves me money while I invest in bigger things." He blinked, surprised, then nodded. Smart. For the first time, the joke didn't stick. And I realized humiliation only worked if I let it. Sunday came fast. I dressed simply, but inside, I carried something new: evidence, confidence, and the beginnings of power. When I walked into my parents' house, Ryan was already there, grinning, keys flashing on the table. My parents smiled at him like he was royalty. He glanced at me, smirked, and said, "Hey, bus girl, ready to serve?" I smiled back, slow, deliberate, because what he didn't know was that I wasn't there to serve anymore. I was there to set the first trap. The air at my parents' house that Sunday was thick with the smell of roast chicken and the sharp scent of wine. On the surface, it looked like every other family dinner. Mom bustling in the kitchen, Dad at the head of the table, Ryan swaggering in with that grin that always made me feel smaller. But this time, I wasn't smaller. I was carrying a secret. We sat down, and as usual, the conversation tilted toward Ryan. "Ryan closed another deal this week." Mom beamed. "Big things are coming," Dad added proudly. Ryan leaned back, arms stretched, and smirked. "It's all about confidence. People buy what I'm selling." Then his eyes slid to me. "Unlike some people who can't even buy a car." The table laughed softly. My hands tightened around my fork. Normally, I would have dropped my gaze, swallowed the humiliation. But tonight, I lifted my eyes and smiled calmly. "You're right, Ryan," I said. "Some people can't buy a car. But some people prefer to buy companies." The table went quiet. Ryan blinked, caught off guard. Mom frowned. "What does that mean?" I shrugged casually. "Just something I've been working on." Then I returned to my food, letting the silence hang. Ryan chuckled awkwardly, trying to shake it off. But the seed was planted. For the first time, I'd hit back, softly, but enough to rattle him. Later that week, Maya invited me to a board meeting. It was intimidating. Executives in suits, investors with sharp eyes. But when I laid out my operational model, explaining how to cut costs by 20% and increase efficiency without layoffs, the room shifted. They listened. They nodded. They respected me. When the meeting ended, one of the investors shook my hand. "Impressive, Emily. You think like a CEO." My chest swelled. I left the building with my heart racing, not because of the praise, but because I realized Ryan's insults had been wrong all along. I wasn't background. I wasn't a servant. I was a strategist, and strategists win wars. At the next family gathering, Ryan tried again. We were at a cousin's engagement party, crowded living room, music playing. Ryan spotted me near the snack table and smirked. "Careful, Em. Don't spill anything. You might get mistaken for the hired help." People chuckled. My face warmed, but instead of shrinking, I smiled sweetly. "Oh, don't worry, Ryan," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "If I were hired help, I'd at least get paid for cleaning up after you." The laughter that followed wasn't at me. It was at him. Ryan's smile faltered. It was small, subtle, but it was a shift. Meanwhile, my binder of evidence against Ryan was growing. Missed payments, reckless contracts, loans hidden under his partnership. The dealership wasn't a golden empire. It was a house of cards, and I was the quiet wind ready to blow. One night, I sat at my dining table flipping through the pages. My fingers lingered on the most damning one, proof Ryan had forged a signature to push through a deal. If that ever came out, his reputation would crumble. I closed the binder slowly. Not yet. The timing had to be perfect. That week, Sarah, the acquaintance who'd once worked under Ryan, pulled me aside after coffee. "Be careful, Emily," she whispered. "Ryan isn't just careless. He's cruel. If he suspects you're against him, he won't hold back." I nodded, a chill running through me. I knew she was right. But I also knew I wasn't backing down. Not anymore. The more small wins I collected, the stronger I felt. Each comeback, each victory at work, each moment Ryan's smirk slipped. It fueled me. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of him, and for the first time, I started to imagine the moment his laughter would finally die. The next family dinner came quickly. Again, Ryan tried to dominate the table. Again, he made a jab at me. But this time, I came prepared. When he bragged about his dealership's record numbers, I leaned forward and asked innocently, "Oh? That's interesting, because I heard from someone in finance that your cash flow is tricky." His eyes widened. Dad frowned. "What does she mean?" Ryan waved it off quickly. "She doesn't know what she's talking about." I smiled sweetly. "You're right. I probably don't. After all, I'm just the servant, right?" The room went silent. Ryan's jaw tightened. I leaned back, sipping my water, satisfied. That night, as I left my parents' house, Ryan followed me outside. His smile was gone, replaced with something sharper. He leaned close and whispered, "What are you up to, Em? Don't think I don't see it. You try to embarrass me again and you'll regret it." I met his eyes steadily. "Funny. That's exactly what I was going to say to you." For the first time, his glare faltered. I walked to the bus stop, his shadow still burning behind me. What he didn't know was that my trap was already set, and the next move wasn't going to be small. Revenge, I've learned, isn't loud at first. It's quiet, patient. It's late nights with binders, whispered phone calls, tiny wins that no one notices. Until suddenly, everyone does. By the time Ryan tried to corner me outside my parents' house, my plan was already in motion. All I had to do was wait for the perfect stage, and the stage came faster than I expected. 2 weeks later, my parents hosted a family celebration. Dad had invited relatives, friends, even some of Ryan's business partners. The living room was full, wine glasses clinking, laughter echoing. Everyone talking about Ryan's dealership like it was the crown jewel of Dallas. Ryan stood in the center, basking in it all. He loved an audience. He needed it. I stayed near the back, calm, binder tucked neatly in my bag. Mom noticed me. "Emily, come stand with your brother. This is his big night," Ryan grinned. "Yeah, come on, bus girl, witness greatness." Laughter rippled. My cheeks warmed, but this time not from shame. From anticipation, because they had no idea what was about to hit. Ryan raised his glass. To family, to loyalty, to building an empire. Everyone clapped. He basked in it, smiling wide. I stepped forward slowly, my voice clear. "Funny you should mention loyalty." The room quieted. Ryan blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" I smiled faintly. "I just wonder how loyal your partners would be. If they knew about the forged contracts." The silence was instant, heavy. Ryan's grin faltered. "What are you talking about?" I pulled the binder from my bag and laid it on the table. Papers fanned out like a deck of cards. Signatures, invoices, payment delays, loan defaults. I spoke calmly, almost casually. "Here's what I'm talking about. Missed payments, reckless loans, and oh, this forged signature from a vendor who already confirmed it wasn't theirs." Gasps, murmurs. People leaned in, eyes darting between the papers and Ryan's paling face. Ryan lunged forward, grabbing the documents. This is fake. She's making it up." But Marcus, my finance contact, was there. He'd come at my invitation. He stepped forward, cleared his throat, and said firmly, "I can confirm this. These documents are real. Ryan's dealership is financially unstable. If the banks see this, it's over." The room exploded into whispers. Ryan turned on me, eyes blazing. "You set me up." I met his glare calmly. "No, Ryan, you set yourself up. I just stopped hiding it for you." Mom stood, voice trembling. "Emily, stop this. This is your brother." Dad's face was red, fists clenched. "You don't air family business in front of outsiders." I turned to them, steady. "Family business? You wanted me to sell my house for this." For a fraud. For a man who built an empire out of lies. Their silence was answer enough. One of Ryan's so-called partners slammed his glass down. "You lied to us, Ryan? Do you know what this could cost us?" Another muttered, "We trusted you," Ryan stammered, sweat glistening on his forehead. I can fix this." But the room wasn't listening anymore. The tide had turned, and for the first time, Ryan's laugh was gone. His grin was gone. His confidence shattered. I reached into my bag one last time and pulled out a single envelope. Inside was my new contract, operations director at Maya's startup. I laid it on the table next to his collapsing empire. The letterhead gleamed under the light. While Ryan was busy mocking me for taking the bus, I said softly, "I was building something real. I don't need to sell my house. I don't need his money. I don't need him." I let the words hang. The silence was deafening. Ryan shoved the papers off the table, face twisted in rage. "This isn't over," he shouted, storming out. The front door slammed behind him, the room buzzed with whispers, relatives shaking their heads, his partners exchanging sharp words. Mom's face was pale, eyes wide. Dad sank into his chair, silent for once. And me? I stood there, heart pounding, calm on the outside but electric inside, because I had done it. I'd turned the tables, but as the guests began filing out, whispering about the scandal, Mom turned to me. Her voice was low, almost trembling. "Emily," she said, "do you realize what you've done? You've humiliated this family. People will talk. People will never forget." I looked at her steadily. "Good. That's the point." She flinched as if I'd struck her, and in that moment, I realized the fallout wasn't just Ryan's. It was all of theirs. What I didn't know yet was how far that fallout would reach and how much it would change everything. The night I exposed Ryan felt like a storm. Papers scattered across the table, relatives whispering, business partners furious, my parents pale with shock. When I finally left my parents' house, the air outside was cool and still. like the world itself had paused. But storms don't end just because you step outside. They leave wreckage behind. The first sign came the next morning. My phone buzzed with a message from Mom. "We need to talk." I didn't reply. By noon, Dad called. His voice was gruff, brittle. "Emily, what you did. You embarrassed us. You humiliated your brother in front of everyone." I bit my tongue, then said calmly, "I told the truth." His silence was long and heavy. Then he muttered, "Sometimes the truth should stay in the family." I hung up before he could say more. News spread quickly. Ryan's partners started pulling out of deals. Marcus texted me. Bank pulled line of credit. Dealership bleeding. He's in trouble. Part of me felt satisfaction, sharp, sweet. But another part felt hollow. Ryan had built his identity on being untouchable. Now he was unraveling. A week later, I saw him. He showed up at my townhouse unannounced. His Mustang wasn't outside. He must have walked. When I opened the door, his eyes were bloodshot, his face gaunt. "You ruined me," he hissed. "No," I said evenly. "You ruined yourself. I just stopped protecting you." His hands clenched into fists. For a moment, I thought he might lash out. But then he broke. His shoulders sagged, his eyes filled with something I'd never seen in him before. Not anger, not pride, just fear. He turned and walked away without another word. Mom called again. This time she was crying. "Emily, how could you do this to your own brother? He's lost everything. We raised you better than this." I swallowed hard. "You raised me to be invisible. You raised me to sacrifice for him. I'm done." She sobbed, then whispered, "You've destroyed this family." But the truth? The family had destroyed itself a long time ago. I had just stopped pretending. Meanwhile, my life at Maya's startup was blossoming. I walked into the office one morning to applause. The board had announced my official appointment as operations director. Investors shook my hand, colleagues congratulated me. Maya hugged me tightly. "You earned this, Em. Don't ever forget it." I smiled, but deep inside, a question gnawed. Why did it take strangers to see my worth when my own family never did? A week later, I visited Grandma's grave. The grass was damp, the sky overcast. I knelt, placing fresh flowers down. "Hi, Grandma," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You always said quiet rivers run deep. I guess you were right. They didn't see me coming." Tears slid down my cheeks. "I wish you'd been here. Maybe then I wouldn't have felt so alone." I closed my eyes and imagined her warm hand on mine. Her steady voice reminding me that being overlooked never meant being powerless. At home, I found myself staring into the mirror one night. I didn't see the quiet accountant anymore. I didn't see the servant they mocked. I saw someone harder, sharper, stronger, but also lonelier. Because revenge doesn't just cost the person you strike. It costs you too. One evening, as I was making tea, there was a knock at the door. I opened it and froze. It was Dad. He stood there, weary, his face lined deeper than I remembered. "Emily," he said softly, "can we talk?" My heart pounded. I didn't know if I was ready, for anger, for apologies, for more betrayal. I stepped aside slowly, letting him in. We sat across from each other at my small kitchen table. He looked around at the sticky notes still on the wall, the laptop open, the life I had built quietly, piece by piece. Finally, he sighed. "Maybe we were wrong about you. Maybe we should have seen you sooner." My throat tightened, but before I could answer, he added, "But Ryan's still your brother, and if you think this is over, you're wrong." His words hung heavy in the room, twisting the knife of uncertainty. Because even in victory, the past has claws. Dad's words, "If you think this is over, you're wrong," echoed in my head for days. At first they rattled me. Maybe he was right. Maybe I hadn't really won. Maybe my family's shadow would always cling to me, but the truth was simpler. It was over. Not because Ryan forgave me, or because my parents finally saw me, but because I no longer needed them to. The next morning, I walked to the bus stop as usual. The air was crisp, the city just waking. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't the same girl clutching a coffee, dreading Ryan's car pulling up. I wasn't the servant at the dinner table, waiting for permission to speak. I was the woman who had turned humiliation into power. The bus arrived with its usual hiss, but this time, I didn't board. I smiled faintly, turned, and walked the other way, toward the parking garage where my new car waited. Not just a car. A Lamborghini. When I slid behind the wheel, the leather hugged me, the engine purred, and for the first time, I felt like the sound itself was rewriting history. At Maya's startup, my days were long, but they were mine. My team respected me. Investors trusted me. Every system I designed was another brick in the empire we were building. My empire. Maya grinned one night after a late meeting. You know, Em, the way you're running this, don't be surprised if the board calls you CEO one day. I laughed, but deep down, I believed her. For the first time in my life, the word boss didn't feel like a joke. It felt like my truth. I didn't see Ryan for months. Word spread. His dealership closed, debts piled up, friends vanished. The golden boy had fallen, and the silence where his laughter used to be was almost eerie. One night I got a text from an unknown number. Do you feel proud? You destroyed me. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered, then I typed back, No, Ryan, you destroyed yourself. I just stopped covering for you. Then I blocked the number, and just like that, his shadow finally lifted. My parents never fully forgave me. Maybe they never will. Mom still calls sometimes, her voice tight, carrying both guilt and blame. Dad keeps his distance, pride dented, silence heavier than words. But here's what I've learned. Closure doesn't always come from them. Sometimes closure comes from yourself. I stopped waiting for their approval. I stopped craving their applause. I built my own stage. Months later, there was another family gathering. Smaller this time, quieter. I pulled up in the Lamborghini. The engine echoed down the street, heads turned, whispers followed. When I stepped out, heels clicking, sunglasses glinting, Ryan, standing awkwardly near the porch, froze. He didn't laugh. He didn't smirk. He didn't say a word. For once, silence was my victory. Here's the truth I want you to take away. People will try to define you by their laughter, their expectations, their labels. They'll tell you you're a servant, a background character, a bus girl, but their definitions only stick if you let them. You have the power to write your own story, to turn pain into purpose, to prove that quiet rivers do run deep, and when they rise, they can flood everything in their path. So if this story touched you, please like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Now I want to ask you, if your family mocked you, humiliated you, would you forgive them, or would you walk away forever? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your thoughts.